there's a sound, 3 syllables, that when spoken correctly, Archons cannot survive in your presence. Not because it banishes them through force, but because it elevates your frequency so high that they simply dissolve, like darkness when you turn on light. Jesus gave this key, 3 syllables, ancient, powerful, and completely free. The church hid it because if everyone knew these 3 syllables, the entire control system would collapse overnight. In the next 20 minutes, you're going to understand why Archons cannot survive this key, what happens to them when you speak it, and how to pronounce it today so you never have to deal with their interference again. But before I give you the 3 syllables, I need to explain what makes this key different from everything else you've tried. It was researching this that made me understand why here at Awakened Minds, we go directly to primary sources. Because what survived in mainstream religion is deliberately incomplete. Look, you grew up believing that fighting darkness requires rituals, right? Holy water, sage, prayers, protection spells, entire ceremonies designed to push negative forces away. And maybe they work, temporarily, but have you noticed they always come back? That's because you're fighting symptoms, not cause. This story of spiritual warfare as battle started when Christianity merged with Roman military culture. They needed enemies. They needed conquest language. So they framed spirituality as war. Light versus dark. Angels versus demons. You versus Archons. From then on, priests repeated it. Exorcists confirmed it. And for 2,000 years, spiritual practice became defensive. Protect yourself, shield yourself, fight them off. But look at what doesn't make sense here. If you truly are divine spark, fragment of the source, why would you need to fight anything? Why would beings of lower consciousness have power over you in the first place? Because they don't, unless you give it to them. The key Jesus taught isn't weapon, it's reminder. 3 syllables that wake you up to what you already are. And when you remember, Archons can't touch you. Not because you defeated them, because you transcended the frequency where they exist. A study at the Institute of Noetic Sciences in 2012 measured brainwave patterns during different spiritual practices. They found that mantras, especially 3-syllable ones, created coherence between brain hemispheres faster than any other method. Coherence equals consciousness. Consciousness equals frequency elevation. And Archons exist in fragmented, low coherence states. It was when I crossed this data with ancient texts that everything clicked. We weren't taught the key, we were taught to keep fighting. So if fighting doesn't solve it, what does? There's a concept Gnostics understood perfectly. They called it Anamnesis, remembering. Buddhists call it Bodhi, awakening. Hindus call it Moksha, liberation. I call it the 3-syllable key. The idea is radical, man. You're not weak human fighting powerful Archons. You're imprisoned God who forgot what you are. And Archons aren't stronger than you. They're parasites that survive only because you're asleep. The 3 syllables Jesus taught are wake-up call. Spoken correctly, they trigger remembering. And in that moment of remembering, you become what Archons fear most. Conscious divinity. Sounds too simple when you first hear it, right? But think about it. Why do all enlightened beings say the same thing? You are already that which you seek. Why do mystics across traditions teach that liberation isn't achievement, but recognition? Because you're not becoming powerful. You're remembering you always were. And Archons survive on amnesia. When you remember, their game ends. It makes sense because frequency is reality. You don't defeat low frequency. You transcend it. like you don't fight with darkness. You turn on light, and darkness ceases to exist. This isn't me inventing metaphors. The Gospel of Truth, Gnostic text from 2nd century, says, "Ignorance brought anguish and terror, but remembering brings immediate freedom. The Savior came not to fight, but to remind." The Pistis. Sophia describes Jesus teaching 3 sacred vowels to Mary Magdalene. When she intones them, Archons wail and flee, for they cannot exist where remembering has occurred. The Apocryphon of John states, "When the light recognizes itself, the rulers have no power. They exist only in forgetfulness." The information was always there, just not convenient for you to realize how simple liberation actually is. And I'm not just going to tell you this, I'm going to prove it, with suppressed teachings, with science of frequency, and with the 3 syllables themselves, starting with a manuscript that was buried for explaining this too clearly. Let's start with what was hidden. In the 3rd century, Origen of Alexandria, one of early Christianity's greatest theologians, wrote On First Principles. In it, he explains that Jesus taught 2 doctrines: outer teaching for masses, inner teaching for those ready. The inner teaching, he wrote, involved 3 sacred utterances that restore original nature. In 553 AD, the Second Council of Constantinople declared Origen a heretic posthumously. They ordered all his writings burned, especially sections dealing with pre-existence of souls and restoration of all things. Why? Because if souls are pre-existent divine sparks temporarily incarnated, church loses control. If restoration is remembering, not earning, sacraments become unnecessary. Most of Origen's work was destroyed, but fragments survived. In one fragment preserved in Philokalia, he writes, "The name has 3 parts. Father, Son, Spirit are not titles, but sounds. When combined and intoned, they form key that unlocks what was locked at birth." 3 syllables, unlocking what was locked. And it's not isolated case. The Nag Hammadi texts contain the thunder perfect mind, where divine feminine speaks in paradoxes. Scholars noticed the text has rhythmic structure. When read aloud in Coptic, certain phrases form 3-syllable patterns that repeat. Mystics who chant it report altered states, sense of recognition, dissolution of fear. The Greek magical papyri, spells from Egypt dated 1st to 5th century, contain hundreds of formulas. But the most powerful, marked as supreme key, are consistently 3 syllables: I-A-O, A-U-M, Y-A-H. Too consistent to be random, but ancient texts can be dismissed as mysticism, right? So let me show you what happens when modern people actually use 3-syllable keys. Thomas Merton, Trappist monk, Catholic mystic. In his private journals published after death, he describes discovering 3-syllable mantra during meditation retreat in 1968. He doesn't reveal what it was, but he writes, "After 7 days of continuous repetition, I experienced what can only be called dissolution of separate self. Fear vanished, not suppressed, vanished, as if the very mechanism that generated it stopped functioning. 3 syllables, 7 days, complete transformation, and it's not isolated case." Bede Griffiths, Benedictine monk who lived in India, wrote about combining Christian prayer with Hindu mantra practice. He found that 3-syllable Sanskrit mantras like Soham produced faster unitive experiences than longer prayers. He said, "The shorter the formula, the deeper it penetrates. 3 syllables seem to be threshold where sound becomes silence, where practice becomes being." Modern neuroscience confirms this. Dr. Andrew Newberg's studies on meditation show that repetitive 3-syllable phrases reduce activity in parietal lobe, area responsible for sense of separate self. Less separate self equals less fear. Less fear equals no foothold for Archons. This information came through a monk who follows awakened minds. He's practiced three-syllable keys across multiple traditions for 40 years and sent me comparative results that validate everything. But you know what's most interesting? Who you'd least expect already uses this daily. Did you know Orthodox Christians use Kyrie eleison, 3 syllables, repeated hundreds of times? They call it Jesus prayer shortened. Monks report that after prolonged repetition, prayer becomes self-praying. Tibetan Buddhists use Om Ahung, 3 seed syllables representing body, speech, mind of enlightenment, chanted to dissolve obscurations. Sufis use La ilaha, first part of Shahada, 3 syllables meaning no God, repeated to negate false gods, including ego. Hindus use Soham, 3 syllables meaning I am that, synchronized with breath to maintain constant remembering. The most advanced practitioners across all traditions use 3 syllables. The difference? Most don't know why it works, they just know it does. Why? That brings us to the next point. Look at what we've gathered so far. Gnostic texts described it. Ancient practices used it. Neuroscience validated it. And mystics across traditions already do it. Everything pointing in same direction. So why isn't this taught openly? Why not in churches? Why not common knowledge? The answer isn't pretty. To understand why this is hidden, you need to follow the dependency. Who loses everything if you learn 3 syllables that free you? Every institution built on your spiritual dependency. Churches need you believing liberation is complicated, requires membership, requires their services. If 3 syllables spoken daily for free creates same result as decades of tithes and rituals, they lose what? Revenue, authority, reason to exist. And how do they ensure you don't learn? First, they make spirituality complicated. You need theology degree to understand. Second, they gatekeep. Sacred words are only for ordained. Third, they create fear. Don't play with spiritual forces you don't understand. But the truth? 3 syllables. Daily practice, that's it. It's worked for millennia, keeping you dependent. It'll keep working as long as you accept complexity. And who pays the price? You. Spending years in spiritual practices that keep you fighting instead of transcending. Paying for courses, books, sessions. Living in fear of archonic interference. All because 3 free syllables that liberate you aren't profitable for those who profit from your bondage. I know it's infuriating to realize this. I was furious when I discovered it. But fury without action changes nothing. What changes everything is speaking the key. And the good news? I'm going to give it to you. Let me show you exactly how. Enough theory. I'm going to give you 3 steps to find and use your 3-syllable key. First step. Choose your key. It works like this. The key isn't one universal formula, it's category. Any 3 syllables that represent for you divine remembering. For Christians, it could be Kyrie eleison, or I am God. For Sanskrit practitioners, Soham, or Om Namah. For Hebrew mystics, Ehya Asher, or YHWH, broken into 3. Why does this work? Because power is in what syllables mean to you, and your conviction when speaking them. Start here. Today. Choose 3 syllables that trigger remembering of your divine nature. Second step. Practice correct pronunciation. This will require attention. What you do. Once you've chosen, learn to pronounce clearly. Slowly. Feel each syllable vibrate in different part of body. First syllable in belly, second in heart, Third in head. Creating column of vibration. Practice until you can say it smoothly, with one breath, feeling full body resonance. Most people who did this reported that after 3 days of practice, the key started saying itself during daily activities. Third step, and this is for those who want complete Archon immunity. Repeat for 40 days minimum. The 3 syllables aren't magic spell. They're reconditioning tool. Repetition rewires your frequency baseline. How? Morning and night, minimum. Sit or stand. Close eyes. Repeat your key 108 times. Use mala beads if helpful. Do this for 40 days without missing one day. Not for everyone. But if you did step 1 and 2 first, you'll be ready. The specific benefit? After 40 days, your baseline frequency will be so high that Archons simply avoid you. Not because you're fighting, because you're no longer on their frequency band. Now, attention. There are 2 mistakes most people make with this. Mistake 1, expecting instant Hollywood transformation. This happens because we want magic. It doesn't work that way. Change is cumulative. Subtle at first, but compounds into complete shift. Mistake 2, mechanically repeating without presence. Avoid this by bringing full attention to each repetition. Quality over quantity. 10 conscious repetitions beat 1,000 mechanical ones. If you avoid those 2, you're ahead of 99% of people. What to expect? First week. You'll feel calmer. Negative thoughts lose intensity. After 40 days, noticeable baseline shift. What used to trigger you doesn't anymore. Toxic people seem to naturally leave your life. After 6 months, Archons can't survive in your presence. They literally can't maintain form in your field. It's not magic. It's frequency mechanics that Jesus taught, and that was stolen from you. Let's recap. You came in maybe tired of fighting spiritual battles. You discovered Archons can't survive elevated frequency. You saw the proof. Gnostic texts, monastic practices, neuroscience. You understood why it's kept complicated. And now you have 3 steps to choose and use your 3-syllable key. In 20 minutes, you learned what most will never know. You're not the same person who clicked this video. Now you know you don't have to fight. You just have to remember. The question is, will you speak the key? And this is just the surface. There's much more about breathwork combinations, about charging the syllables with visualization, about complete archontic immunity that I couldn't cover here. If you want me to go deeper, leave it in the comments. If this video made sense to you, leave a like. It helps the algorithm show it to more people who need liberation. And subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next ones. Remember, you don't need complex rituals. You need 3 syllables and 40 days. And now you know how to begin. See you in the next one.